Hi everyone, my name is Laura and today we are going to start unit number 6 on genetics and biotechnology, and this is actually the first video for day 1 of unit number 6, and the topic for today is about the importance of creating language objectives in the science classroom to support English language learners. So let's begin. You may be wondering, why language objectives? Why? You also may be thinking, hey, I'm just a content teacher. I am not a language teacher. However, English language learners receive the majority of their instruction from general education and content area teachers. So we need to get ready to teach our students language as well. That's why introducing language objectives in our class is going to be an effective way of helping our English language learners to acquire language. Some characteristics of language objectives are, number one, they promote academic growth in the class, not only for multilingual learners, but for all your students. Number two, they support multilingual learners in accessing content, and I would say especially in the science classes. Number three, they articulate for learners the academic language functions and skills that they need to master to fully participate in the lesson. They are beneficial for all the students in the class, not only for English language learners. That will be number four. And finally, they involve the 4 language skills that are speaking, reading, writing, and listening. I guess the question is now, wait, but how do I start? How do I write a compelling, great language objective for my English language learners? All right, so to be able to do that, let's take a look at our lesson for today. So we are actually launching our unit number 6 today on genetics and biotechnology. And we have an essential question in here on how can studying different types of plants help scientists to identify new kind of molecules that could potentially be developed into new kinds of medicines. And it's followed by a why question. Why is it important? Why is this important, right? So to know more about the lesson, let's go to where the lesson objectives are. Lesson objectives can be found on page 11 on the slide deck. And also, just like to remind you, scaffolds for multilingual students can be found on pages or slides number 6 and slide number 7. So now we're looking at the lesson objectives, and we're going to realize that some of the objectives are content objectives, but we also have language objectives embedded in there in the slide. So for example, we have in here explain, or students will be able to explain why preserving plant biodiversity is important for maximizing our chances of discovering valuable medicinal compounds in plants. Remember that content objectives give us the what of the lesson, and the language objectives gives us the how. Basically, language objectives are the way in which students are going to demonstrate that they mastered the lesson today. And this is how they're going to do it today. They're going to do it by explaining why preserving plant biodiversity is important for maximizing our chances of discovering valuable medicinal compounds in plants. If this is a too general language objective for you, you can always make it a little bit more specific for your lesson. Like, let's say that you want students to explain orally, or you want students to explain in writing, or maybe you want the students to write a paragraph and you want them to use a specific vocabulary. So in this last part of the video, I will explain to you how can you write language objectives that are aligned with the content objectives in your lessons. According to the website Coloring Colorado, there is a useful guidelines that you can use when writing language objectives. Number 1, decide what key vocabulary, concept words, and other academic words the students will need to know in order to talk, read, and write about the topic of the lesson. Using a specific tier 3 words that you have taught in the class in a specific paragraph or sentence may already be a content objective. Number 2, Consider the language functions related to the topic of the lesson. Are the students describing? Are they explaining? Will they be comparing? Will they be extracting information from a chart? That is also, or that could potentially be also a language objective. Number 3, think about the language skills that are necessary for students to accomplish the lesson's activities. Will the students be reading from a textbook passage? Will the students be orally explaining? Will be the students maybe discussing with other peers? That's also a language objective. Number 4, identify grammar or language structures common to the content area. For example, many textbooks use passive voice to describe processes. So maybe using the passive voice as they write a lab report can also be a language objective. Number 5, you can consider the tasks that the students will complete and the language that will be embedded in those assignments. For example, if students are working in a scientific investigation together, they may need to write the steps of the procedure to one another. That's also a language objective. And number 6, explore language learning strategies that lend themselves to the topic of the lesson. For example, if the students are starting a new chapter in the book, the strategy of previewing the text may be an appropriate language objective. The first time I heard talking about language objectives, it was when I learned how to use SIOP, the Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. I think they're the ones that popularized the use of language objectives. And SIOP put together like a cheat sheet that really helps to write those language objectives, including the verbs that are most used when writing language objectives that relate to everything that we have seen, such as the academic vocabulary, the function of the word, the skill of the student, etc. All right, and remember that language objectives, they are linked to the 4 basic language skills: writing, listening, reading, and speaking. To end my video, I leave you with this cheat sheet from SIOP that you can find online. And it's basically a sheet that is going to help you to write your language objectives. So some of the verbs that you can use as you write your objectives are role play, identify, listen, write, follow directions, discuss, rephrase, predict, summarize, explain, preview, read aloud, identify, skim, explore, summarize, answer questions, create sentences, state, justify, define, record, classify, etc., etc. You have also a checklist for evaluating content and language objectives next to it. Remember, the objectives are observable. The objectives are written and presented in language the students can understand. The content objective is related to the key concept of the lesson, and the language objective promotes student academic language growth. I always say, echoing what SIOP says, their content objective is the what the students are doing, and their language objective is the how the students are doing that what. The language objectives connect clearly with the lesson topic or lesson activities, and I have a plan for assessing student progress on meeting these objectives during the lesson. So make sure that you're following that guidelines, and good luck to you at writing when it comes to writing your language objectives. This is the end of my video. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope this was useful to you.